Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Grimm Chronicles. I am Kathy Grimm, otherwise known as the Grimm Reader, and I apologize for a Wednesday video. I usually upload on Tuesdays, and I tried to do that yesterday, but it was a complete fail. And the reason is I decided I wanted to try and get better sound for my video, because I'm sort of sensing the sound isn't that great with the phone. So I tried to do it on my computer, and it all worked out fairly well, but then when I went to upload it, it took forever, and what would happen is the computer would go to sleep and then it would stop uploading, which is something I could have just fixed it in and then, you know, make it so that it doesn't go to sleep forever. But it seems to be, it was very slow uploading. Anyway, I decided to just ditch that version of it. You weren't missing much, and try again today. So my reading for the past week, I finished two things. I finished my audiobook, which was Medical Grade Music, the sort of dual autobiography of these two wonderful, funny men, Steve Davis, the snooker champion from England, I forget where, Plymouth. Well, no, the other guy's from Plymouth. I don't know if Steve Davis is from Plymouth. And Kavus Tarabi, Iranian family, and then but basically British too, with this Iranian background, and he's definitely Plymouth based, and it's just a wonderful, for anyone interested in what I guess is sort of deemed underground music, or a little bit, it's not commercial music. These are people who they're not, well, I mean, Kavus Tarabi's first love was the Stray Cats. And I know who the Stray Cats were, but they never did it for me the way they did it for him. But they're not really that underground. But then he went on into other more esoteric areas music-wise. And so what you get in this book are 30 chapters of them switching off, telling us about their musical history, their musical loves. And they're both really, and also the reason why it's them writing together is that they have come together to form this new band called The Utopia Strong. The third person in the Utopia Strong is someone called Michael J. York, who is from a band called The Coil. This is all out of my, I don't really know them, and I haven't really spent a lot of time listening to that band's music, although they do talk about it in the book, how it went from them doing DJ stints with their specific musical tastes, but it kind of worked well at the venues that they tried, which were sort of rave venues, or rave, you know, type venues, although they're at Glastonbury and I'm not sure. But anyway, the people in the audience liked the DJ efforts, and kind of they got to be more well known for that, and then it morphed into Steve buying a Moog, although he says it differently, Moog, a synthesizer type thing, and getting involved in becoming proficient with that. And that's how he goes from being a snooker champion to actually being a recording artist in this band. That's sort of the later part of the book. And by that time, it's very much a 5-star read all the way through. But by that time, I was sort of, it is a long book, or, you know, I think some of the earlier chapters are my favorites for both of them. But not to say that the last one's bad, but I think I just kind of was in a bit of a different space, but they're still wonderful too, and it's still interesting to see how they, you know, but at the end it does turn into sort of anecdotes about them and their lives as musicians. And there's sort of all these funny, it's actually a really funny book. I laughed out loud a lot. They're both really, really funny, and there's you know, amusing anecdotes about Steve, or both of them, but specifically Steve being caught in this tree house type situation at Glastonbury, doing a DJ stint for many, many hours with no toilet and only some bottles that they had to fill up. And it's just pretty funny. And even as he was telling it, I was thinking, well, so how are they going to get the bottles down from the treehouse? And the punchline is they don't, they just leave them there. I mean, and sort of, you know, so silly stuff, but also very amusing, and you do learn a lot about their musical tastes. And I became interested in, I think as of right now, I'm more interested in things that his big love is this French prog rock band Magma, whose music is really interesting, and I do like it. And then some other ones from his other prog rock interests in the Canterbury scene, which I wasn't really familiar with. Henry Cow, pretty cool stuff. And then I do like some of Carlos Tarabi's stuff, specifically his newest stuff. And I'm gonna go back and check more of some other bands he was in. I was not familiar with any of them. So he's been a guitarist. He's been a working musician, not a very rich one, but still a working and having had a really interesting, cool life. A guitarist with Gong, Guapo, the Cardiacs, and Knife World. And I think Cardiacs involved his sort of hero, father figure, very close friend, Tim Smith, who I also didn't know about. And at the end, it does get kind of sad because of what happens there. So it's a really good read, and I am looking at this website, which has a few reviews, and I don't really like doing reviews of other people, but this one review snippet is from someone called Spider Stacy, who is a musician with the Pogues, or was at some point with the Pogues, so the Irish band. And I just thought he wrote it, he kind of captures the atmosphere or vibe of the book really well when he writes here. So excuse me for looking at the screen while I read this out to you guys. So here we have our Butch and Sundance, adrift on strange seas with heads full of stray cats and gentle giants, magmatic rumbles surging from hidden volcanoes, new lands, glistening with life in a Roger Dean dawn. For all those boys in RAF greatcoats with stacks of LPs tucked under their arms, waiting for a man to come on, all those girls who insisted you come with them to see King Crimson at the Rainbow in 1973, and to their spiritual descendants, wherever and whoever they may be. So that kind of captures the vibe and sort of for the audience of this book. You do have to have at least an interest in all this type of music, and I do, and even more so, as I get older. Like when I was younger, I really wasn't into things like King Crimson or not really at all, but I've come to appreciate them in books like this even more so. So wonderful read for anyone who's interested in that stuff. And I listened to it as an Audible book, and I would highly recommend that because their funny voices and the way they read their own stuff is just very entertaining if you're into this stuff. Amiable is, I'm reading another one here. Amiable, unusual, and occasionally impenetrable. I don't know about that. It's just, you kind of get into their mind of these really, really passionate musicians and music people. Yeah. And so the other book I finished was The Class by Lucinda Rosenfeld, published in 2017, which takes us into sort of, it's a book about, it takes place in Brooklyn. So it's a Brooklyn book about parents and parenting, and the New York Times talks about this idea of competitive parenting. And I, as someone who's never been a parent and is fine with that, very fine with that, because I think it's a really, really difficult, hard job, and also a thankless job in some senses, not always, but of course if you have a good relationship with your kids, it's fine, but it can be really hard. And then you get all the sort of the social pressure too, and this is a book about that too. It hones in on one woman, Karen, and her family, and how her own insecurities about herself primarily, but about her whole life and her life decisions kind of get her decisions regarding school, the school for her daughter, and even her daughter, she projects a lot of her own anxieties onto the kids. And I think parents do that a lot. I mean, if they have anxieties, if they don't, then it's fine. But and so you get, so the kids sort of, I thought Ruby was very well depicted as a difficult, not exactly difficult, but she is kind of her own person, and she's not someone that everyone likes, and that, and in a way we should all be okay with that. We should sort of, and her mother is sort of, Karen's really interesting. She is the main focus of the book. She's so anxious as to, well, why don't other people like my daughter? And you can sort of tell it's sort of like, well, why don't they like me? Or what's wrong with me that they don't like her? There's a kind of codependent thing almost going on there with Karen. Her second guessing, and in terms of other people's motives, could be a turnoff for some people in the book. It's part of the satirical nature, is that she's very, very unsure, but it leads her to make strange choices that almost seemed what's the word? I think it's borderline, not bipolar, borderline. Some of the moral choices she ends up making are, you know, entirely the wrong ones. And, but yet, in the moment we see why she's done these things, and it sort of leads to the inherent comedy of the book, although it's sort of a satire that is not out loud funny. I never laughed because it's hyperbolic, it's exaggerated, but barely so. It's sort of realistic in that sense. I could really see it as a HBO show, a limited series type thing. Even though it's not a mystery, which they seem to prefer to do. It's more satirical about how she wants to send her kid to the school that's impoverished and doesn't have a lot of non-minority students, to do the right thing, to sort of have her daughter interact with what is the world, basically, what the world looks like, as opposed to a bubble. And of course, some things happen there that make her second guess that decision. And so she ends up, for a short time, sending the kid to another school, which is also a public school, but it's very, very well off. It's obscenely wealthy because the parents themselves are very wealthy. And she finds out because she has to do with the PTA, because her actual job is also sort of a do-gooder type job of being a fundraiser, or, yeah, she raises funds for this charity. That's her job. Because she does sort of have her heart in the right place in a certain sense. And then, you know, the family life is depicted sort of, the husband isn't portrayed very sympathetically, but you sort of understand why. And it is also kind of to do with class. And she does a really good job of the satire. The people who are really made fun of are the rich people, which is what you want. You don't, you know. and the sort of the way they dress, the really wealthy moms all wear certain types of clothing, and she describes them, and they eat certain types of food, and Karen herself is very, very borderline eating disorder connected to healthy foods and low calorie foods. Her looks, the way she looks, she's, you know, she's obsessed with that, to the point of there too projecting onto her kid, who really, you know, and at the end, sort of it does, I'm not doing a good job, but I'm just rambling here. It sort of has a sort of a happy end, but it's a quiet happy end too. And one of the things you see happening to Karen is that she gets more relaxed about food. You know, food is food. You know, the kid can eat a cookie. The kid can eat an Oreo. The kid can eat a Chips Ahoy cookie. You don't have to go crazy because of in the beginning, she sort of like thinks of these things as poison, and also as class indicators. So food as class indicator, like bad food, quote unquote, as being a sign of lower class type habits, which I think it's really interesting, and I think she's done a good job here. I mean, I'm going to give it 4 stars. It's not literary. It's not sort of literary in the same way that some of the other new books I read, which I don't really read it often, but Luster comes to mind, was a 5-star read. That's really a more ambitious type of book, I would say. And it's also about class and race, but coming at it from a different angle, of course. I thought Luster was actually really interesting. And even, I should have looked up the author. Otessa Moschweg, the book about my year rest and relaxation, which I actually thought was almost laugh out loud funny, and also kind of poignant too. I thought that was more literary. I liked that book, and I actually want to read more of her. I keep forgetting to put her on my list. I think she's doing something interesting with her writing, and something a little bit more experimental perhaps than this one was. But I still think I vaguely looked, I came across an article by, I'll see if I can find it, put it in the show notes. Katie, another writer who had been blurbed in a less, anyway, had some interaction with Lucinda that wasn't, they're not best buddies, but she wrote how she was surprised that Lucinda's books hadn't made Ms. Rosenfeld, the book hadn't made a bigger splash, that she sort of disappeared a little bit. And it is interesting if you think of writers' careers. Well, how does someone become really well known and a bestseller, and how do other people just kind of, you know, don't. And so this is 2017. I would be interested in what else she's doing, and this was actually quite good. It was. I was almost sort of prepared to DNF it and think, oh, this is just silly, this is stupid, this is over the top, this is not convincing. But it never got that way, even though I could sort of see how for some people Karen would be excuse me if I say too much of a Karen, but you know, in that, although I'd like to hear from people what you think about the whole Karen stuff, about, you know, Karens in the wild and all that. Because on the one hand, it is very much, you know, it's about race and white privilege and all of that. And on the other hand, I do think it's it's anti-woman of a certain type, the hysterical woman. Of course, the hysterical white woman. And yeah, I don't know, the whole Karen thing is interesting. But I'm getting away from the book. So I would recommend it. It's a good read, and for most people, a very fast read. It's you do want to figure out what's happening, because some of the stuff that she does is pretty like, really? Is that, you going there? You going there? Really? And how she extricates herself from these choices that she makes is part of the fun of reading such a book, I guess. And so moving on to my next reads. So I've decided to go back to, for partly because I couldn't think of anything else and I was in a weird mood. So earlier, I think this year, I DNF'd the volume 9 of Patrick O'Brien. So what's it called? Treason's Harbour, I think it was called. And I kind of got angry and irritated with him because I just thought I fell out of love with, and I think I had been sort of in love with both of them, this bromance of Jack Aubrey and Maturin. And I think it was partly my sort of impatience with them growing older, and also the books just kind of changing their tone in a certain sense. And so I'm giving it another chance. I'm going to go back and re-listen to it. I have listened to part of it, but I'm going to finish it and then move on. I think I've sort of stopped with the Stephen Erickson, the very long, I might come back to it. I forget, the Malazan Empire books. My husband's already, I think he's on book 4. He got into them more, which is sort of, from our reading tastes, such as they were, makes sense that he would continue with them and I wouldn't. Although I didn't mind the first 2, but just listening to them, I think I missed so much of it that, I don't know. I think it's sort of a book you might want to at least look at. And he does look at the maps and stuff. I don't think he's looked at the actual book. But anyway, the book that I've started to read is The Leopard by Giuseppe di Lampedusa. And I'm really enjoying it. It's kind of taken a dark turn. I think it's going to be one of these, you can really tell it's a 20th century book about the 19th century. So he's already kind of gone into just the descriptions of certain things are pretty, they're not how you would describe them if you were an actual 19th century person. Let's put it that way. But I think it's going to be really good. And I feel sorry already a little bit for Giuseppe di Lampedusa, because apparently he published it in 1958 and he wasn't really very well known or really very well thought of. And then this sort of hit it big the posthumous bestseller type situation. And the tiny bit of research that I'd done on the Wikipedia and stuff it said something about how Giuseppe Tomasi, he was a very solitary man who liked to meditate and read. And there's some quote about him saying that he preferred things to people. And I'm like, a man after my own heart. The misanthropic reading types who I do kind of identify with such people. Anyway, I think it's going to be really good. Tell me if you've read it, if you want to read it. And I was thinking about how little Italian fiction I read, but then of course I have listened to all of my best friend, Ferrante. That was the big one. But other than that, you know, I've dipped into Dante, which is terrible of me to admit that I've never read Dante. And I guess we do read 2 fairy tales from 2 16th century, 17th century fairy talists. But other than that, how many Italian novels have I read? And you tell me your favorite Italian novels. Yeah, it's kind of sad considering, you know, I've read quite a bit of German. But as a slow reader and as someone who I have had admittedly years when I was so busy with work that I didn't read much for fun. And so, yeah, I'm not that well read. I guess that's what I'm saying here in a roundabout way. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, I have big plans for 2022. I've talked myself into something. I'll tell you about it when I get the book. A little daunting there. And yeah, but I think I'm just going to continue with the weekly wrap-ups. Yesterday I was having all kinds of ideas about changing the name and blah, blah, blah. But I'm out of that. And that was in the video, so I'm kind of glad I'm redoing it. So anyway, I hope everyone's doing well and enjoying the holidays despite the bad news about this virus is really just, I don't know, we've got to keep on keeping on and stay safe and healthy and embrace being hermits and reading our books a little bit. And yeah, we'll get through this, most of us, but it's just been, but I still think there's a toll that the whole world has paid in terms of so many people. We've lost a lot of people. A lot of people have lost people that are close to them, and that's hard. That's extremely hard. Anyway, on that jolly note, sorry, wishing you all best for the holidays. I will see you after the holidays so this is week 50, even though we're in the 51st. I'm always a little bit off. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to keep with the Tuesday, although I always think I might try and do a Sunday schedule, but I don't know. I think I'll just keep it at a Tuesday and, as you see, sometimes a Wednesday, but that won't happen a lot when I work, because Wednesdays are busy days. I teach on Wednesdays. Anyway, that's enough for now. Merry Christmas if you celebrate, and happy holidays, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye, and thanks for watching.